My own experience as an entrepreneur started with my family when I was a little kid. And I got a very direct experience because my parents went bankrupt twice. Not once, but twice, which is, it's difficult to go bankrupt. It's harder to go bankrupt twice in less than 5 or 7 years. They had a small hotel in Avila, and they were trying to make ends meet, and they got a lot of debt from a bank, so that they couldn't. In the end, they had to really sell it and pay the debt, and we have to move houses and move from the place where I had been living until I was 14 to another house. And then they started doing another business, which was basically one of those, they got more debt to get one of those big spaces for multi-shops. They were very popular in the 80s, and they got a business for multi-shops. Then there was another crisis. They couldn't sell the small lots, so they went bankrupt again. Basically, we had to start from when they were in the late 50s with a small shop again. So what they learned in those times had really been on the back of my mind for forever, And on my personal case, that was a very strong respect for debt and for what debt means. I think we live in a society that has become very familiar with having debts, and when you go to business school, I can see the difference from many of my friends at business school that we were going to classes on entrepreneurial finance and business finance and all of those things, and you talk about debt and the weighted average cost of capital and the cost of equity versus the cost of debt, and many people don't understand what debt really means, and debt is what can take you bankrupt, while capital, you can lose the capital but you don't go bankrupt. So that's, to me, that was one of the main lessons that I got at that moment. One of the funny things also about failure, and when you talk with Gary about what failure means in Spain, is that if you see people who have gone through an experience of business and have failed, it really leaves you devastated, and it has not only a social stigma, but it has a very important part of legislation that goes against entrepreneurs. In the U.S. or in other countries, if you are running a company and the company goes bankrupt, or the project doesn't go through, limited responsibility ends in the company. So you are not personally liable for company debts or for the debts of the company that has with the Social Security or what have you. In Spain, that's not the case. So it's not only a cultural issue, it's also a very, very specific legal issue that if you go bankrupt and you have debts with Social Security, you are still personally responsible for many of those debts as an administrator. So that's something that I think should be very much stressed on business lessons and on business schools, because I tend to tell to all my friends who are entrepreneurs to have always in your mind the calculation of how much would it cost to fire everybody in the company and pay all their debts, because you never want to go below that amount of money on the bank. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult scenario, because maybe you go and you have 1 million euros or 1.5 million or 500,000 euros for your business. You have investors. You take the money in. You start building the company, and there is a moment, maybe 50,000 euros or 100,000 euros, when if you want to close the company, you can close the company with that money, pay everybody's severance payments, pay your debts, and that's the end of the company. As an entrepreneur, you always want to continue. I personally crossed that line with Idealista, not even knowing that I was crossing any line. Nobody had talked to me about this before. And I thought that the end moment was when you actually run out of money, and it's not true. If you run out of money and you don't have enough cash to pay your debts, then it's considered a responsibility of the administrator, and it can hang on to you personally, on your belongings and on your assets beyond the moment when the company is closed. So I think that's part of legislation that's really tough on entrepreneurs, and that's really what makes people who have been entrepreneurs and who have closed a company very wary and very conscious about not doing it again. So keep that line in mind. run the calculations in your own projects about, how much would it cost to close the company, and make sure that if you reach that moment, you're very open to your investors, that's a moment when it's your personal responsibility, and you cannot take that responsibility alone. Another thing that I learned from these failures with my family, and from other experiences I will tell later, is that entrepreneurs, we tend to be two things. One is overly enthusiastic. You cannot be an entrepreneur if you are not enthusiastic and optimistic about your own chances. And that means that we tend to be blind to risks and blind to things that can happen and things that can, make your business go bankrupt. And the thing you learn when you have gone through failure is that the unthinkable can happen. Is that things that seem totally impossible, like a train disappearing, can happen. And when you talk with entrepreneurs and when you talk with people, that are 60 or 70, they start telling you all the unthinkable things that happen. You begin to be very, very scary about, oh my God, all these things that can go wrong. It's not only that the unthinkable thing can happen, is that I tend to see that the unthinkable tends to happen without even going through the improbable first. There is something that is unthinkable, and then it happens. It's not that it goes from unthinkable to improbable to probable and happens. No, unthinkable happens. So that means that you have to be extreme. Always, I have this association with Jose Maria. I totally agree with him that you're always 2 months away from a disaster. You never know what's going to happen. One day you get in the morning to your office and and somebody has sued you and you didn't even know who this person was, or you learn that there was a problem in your database, and it has I've had competitors who went bankrupt because the database was corrupted. They couldn't get the database back up, and that was the end of the business. So these kind of risks that can happen, and happen very dramatically from one day to the next, and it's impossible to prepare for them. You can do a lot of things to do things right, but it's very difficult to totally avoid them. It makes me think of a couple of stories about wealth and risks. One is Damocles sword. I don't know if people know a lot of people know the expression of Damocles sword, but very few people know what it actually means. I want to tell the story. Damocles was, this Greek philosopher who was always criticizing the king. Do you know the story? Because I want to repeat the story if everybody knows it. You know what? Okay, Damocles was constantly criticizing the king because he was a tyrant. Tyrant? How do you say tyrant? Who was always, thinking of his own wealth and whatever. And the king, to make Damocles understand what it meant to be king, invited him to dinner one day. And, he brought him to the palace, sat him in a beautiful throne and started him serving food, but he had a huge sword pending over his head with a hair. So this sword was pending over him and could, fall on him on any minute. So the metaphor, obviously, for the king, for Damocles, was: can you enjoy the meal? Can you enjoy this beautiful dinner when you know that there is a sword pending over your head that can fall at any moment? Which was funnily what happened also in the Alhambra. There is a beautiful room. I don't know if you've been there. It's the room of the Abencerrajes, la sala de los Abencerrajes in the Alhambra. Very few people know what's called the Abencerrajes room. Abencerrajes was a family in the Nasari kingdom, and there was a very powerful family that I don't know the name Sultan, I guess it was the Sultan or the Caliph, I don't know the title of the Nasari princess, once invited them to dinner in that very same room. And invited the whole family basically to get rid of them. So served them the best food, the best drink, got them drunk, and after the dinner, killed all of them. So when you are in that room, in the Sala de los Abencerrajes, I always think, of those occasions when you are enjoying yourself, you are having fun, you are having a great food, and you don't know that you are not weeks, but hours, from a disaster. So this kind of mindset, I think, that is intrinsic with all entrepreneurs, that we're always, scared, no matter how successful you are, you're always scared that some disaster is, just around the corner, and you have to be totally on the watch, to make sure that nothing happens to you. I like the definition of entrepreneurs that in my school, I studied at Harvard, and they gave me a definition that I totally love about entrepreneurs. And they said that entrepreneurs are people who go after opportunities without the resources to achieve them. So is that you don't have the money, you don't have the skills, you don't have the people, you don't have the contacts, and yet you want to build that business. You know? So that's what entrepreneurs does, is go on the hunt for resources to achieve an opportunity that you see. So it's pursuing an opportunity, hoping that you will be able to make it. So basically this is what I wanted to say. So I think I'm running ahead of time, and I'm here very happy to talk with Alberto.